What is going on, everyone? You are listening to Bull Central here. Hope you're all doing well. So Wednesday is probably one of my favorite days of the week right now because I love making these videos and the hot takes that you guys send me. I wish I could include them all, but as I mentioned in last week's video, I would probably go on and next thing you know it, we would have an hour-long video. And nobody wants that. Last week, I made the video into two separate parts. So I might have to go ahead and do that again today. I'll keep you guys posted on that. But let's go ahead and dive in. And the first one that we got comes from G5. And he says Chandler Hutchinson has the chance to become a dominant bench player if he's healthy. And we actually got two Hutchinson hot takes this week, and the other comes from Gabe Romano, and he says Hutchinson will come back and average 15 points per game and become one of our best bench players. So this is an interesting one because I don't think we've had a Hutchinson hot take so far on this channel. And to be honest, I haven't really covered much of Hutchinson because he hasn't really been on the floor. And that's kind of been the story of Hutchinson since he's entered the league. He just hasn't stayed healthy. So right off the bat, you take that, you have that as a caveat if he's healthy. Well, that's a pretty big if at this point. And I know the most recent absence is due to testing positive for COVID and not an injury. So, obviously hoping for the recovery for him, but still missing more and more time from the floor, it makes it really hard to assess him and his true potential. But let's say for a moment he's fully healthy and is able to stay healthy. You think he can become a dominant bench player. I guess it depends on your definition of dominant. To me, a dominant bench player is essentially someone who can win the Sixth Man of the Year award, or at least be in that conversation, or maybe you just see him as the Bulls' #1 option off the bench. But for Hutchinson, I can see him being a solid bench player because he actually has great athleticism, decent defense, but I don't think I would say he has the ability to be a dominant bench player. There are quite a few holes in his game. One is that he's not the best shooter, and actually he's been a pretty poor shooter at that, especially from three, which is really important in this day and age in the NBA. He's a pretty bad free throw shooter, only shooting 60% from the line in his career. He's not the best passer and isn't known for his playmaking. And given how little he plays, his turnovers per game is pretty subpar as well. He hasn't, even had a PER above 10 in his whole career. Currently, he has a PER of 4.09. Granted, he's only played in 4 games so far this season. So in short, I think he could be a solid bench player if he's healthy because he has that natural athletic ability, which helps in improving areas of your game that are lacking. But a dominant bench player, I'm going to have to say no on that one. Now, for Gabe's take, Chandler averaging 15 points per game this season. So a couple of things. First off, only 3 players on the Bulls are averaging above 15 points per game, and that's Levine, Markkanen, and Coby White. The other thing is Hutchinson is only averaging 3.3 points per game in the 4 games he's played on 13 minutes. So not only would Hutchinson have to play considerably more minutes to get to that point, which I don't think Billy Donovan would do unless he starts balling, which I guess Hutchinson could. But in addition to the minutes, he has to be much more efficient on offense and just really hasn't been so far this season, as I just mentioned in his PER numbers, and his shooting percentage in general has just been really low. And with guys like Otto Porter, Garrett Temple, and Thaddeus Young coming off the bench, no, I would say no. He's not going to average that many points and be our best bench player this season. Also, guys, before I get into the next one, I received so many hot takes on Coby White, and because I covered a lot of Coby White hot takes last week as well, and I made a dedicated video on him yesterday, I didn't want to focus, too much on him, but rather some of the other takes. But I thought I would include this one and leave it at that with Coby. But go ahead and check out my community post, and you can see all the other hot takes there. Some of them were pretty funny, but this one comes from Grazer X, and he says Coby White will be a top 5 point guard in the league in 5 to 6 years. So this one is tough because so much can change that far into the future. But let's try and break this one down from a timeline perspective. 5 to 6 years from now, Coby will be 25, 26, so he will be breaking into his prime. A lot of top point guards in the league right now, today, will likely be retired or on the decline. Guys like Damian Lillard, Steph Curry, Kyle Lowry, Chris Paul, Drew Holiday, just to name a few. So you have to think about current point guards who are around the same age and timeline of Coby going into their prime, or at least, being still in their prime 5 to 6 years from now. So Luka Doncic, and yes, I consider him a point guard, even though not everyone does. In my view, he is currently the best point guard in the league, and he's only 21 years old, which is crazy. So he'll be top 5 still by then, 5 to 6 years from now. Trae Young, he's 22. I think he'll be a top 5 point guard by then. Ben Simmons, he's 24, so he will be a little older, 29 or 30 around that time. But the other problem with Simmons is you never know if he's going to stay healthy, so that could impact whether he would be top 5. But I'm going to go ahead and put him in that category as a top 5 point guard in the league at that point. Then you also have De'Aaron Fox. He's 23 and is playing at an all-star level already. I would expect him to be a top 5 point guard by then. So that's already 4 right there. Now you potentially have other up-and-coming guys, which I would consider Coby White to be one of those, but guys like LaMelo Ball, Tyrese Halliburton, Tyrese Maxey, Cole Anthony, Killian Hayes, even Lonzo Ball, although I doubt that one would be the case. And then, of course, we're talking about 5 to 6 years from now in the future, so who knows what current high schooler or even middle schooler in the next is going to be the next great NBA phenom point guard who instantly becomes one of the top 5 point guards in the league in either their first or second season. So I like where your head is at, because I do think Coby has the potential to be there. The guy is already averaging 16, 5, and 5 in his second season in the league at age 20. So going into his prime, he could end up being one of the best point guards in the league, especially if he can improve his passing and playmaking ability, as well as taking care of the ball and not turning it over as frequently as he does right now. Then yeah, I think there is a good case for him being a top 5 point guard in 5 years, but there is a lot of competition in that position. So if he's not able to improve in those areas, then no, he likely won't be a top 5 point guard. Oh, and his defense, that is obviously a huge thing holding him back in being considered an elite point guard. Next up, this one comes to us from Hudson Fur, and he says the Bulls will be the 6th seed and not have to play in the play-in tournament. So if you've been watching my channel, you know that I predicted the Bulls would finish with the 8th seed and make the playoffs, and that I felt all of the other teams that made the playoffs last season in the East would make it again with different seedings, and that the Bulls would take the Orlando Magic spot. But now things have kind of shifted a bit. The Raptors and Heat have been off to slow starts. Miami, I fully expect them to make it. But the Raptors, I'm not so sure anymore. Then you have some surprises like the Knicks and the Cavs, although I think they'll fall out and not make the playoffs. But they've had decent starts to their season. And then, of course, James Harden was traded to the Nets, so that changes things as well. But for the Bulls to finish 6th in the East, I mean, I think that might be a bit of a stretch, because the Bucks, Nets, Celtics, even the Sixers, I think we can all safely assume all of those teams will finish ahead of the Bulls. So that's 4 right there. Miami is still a great team. They're the defending East champs. They've just had a slow start, so I would expect them to be ahead of the Bulls as well. So that's 5. This would mean the Bulls would need to finish with a better record than teams like the Pacers, Hawks, even the Hornets. And I know I just said I don't think the Raptors will make the playoffs this year, but they did finish with the 2nd best record in the East last season. And they have won 3 games in a row, so it's possible they could be ahead of the Bulls as well. So it's not impossible for the Bulls to finish with the 6th seed, especially if the Bulls fix some of their issues with turning the ball over and playing better defense as a whole. And if they can continue to play team ball like they have been most recently and play consistently well, but it's possible. But I think finishing 6th in the East with the teams they have in front of them, that is pretty unlikely. But I do think they'll finish 8th and make the playoffs. Okay, last take for this video, and I really might just have to do another upload as I received a lot of good hot takes this week, but this one was intriguing to me, and it comes from Robin Schechtman, I believe, and he says Garrett Temple will be the Bulls' best signing in the past 3 years. So if you saw my video when the Bulls signed Garret Temple, I thought this was a pretty meh signing. And I think it's honestly because I just didn't really know much about Garret Temple other than that he was old, had pretty average numbers, and that he was a journeyman in this league. So I thought, okay, this is just Arturas, filling out the roster, and it's a 1-year deal, so it doesn't impact their books for next season's free agency. But honestly, this has been one of the most underrated signings for the Bulls because not only has he been an asset on the court and the numbers he's putting on both ends of the floor, but he's also been a great mentor and coach for these young guys, given the comments the young core has made about Garret Temple. He's been a critical glue guy for this team thus far, and more recently stepping up in the starting lineup and has performed well, very well in that starting unit. So yes, I have to agree, I do think this is the best signing from the Bulls in the last 3 years. Granted, that isn't saying much. I mean, really the Bulls haven't brought any quality free agents to the team in a long time. I mean, a past prime Pau Gasol, Carlos Boozer, who was good on paper but ended up not really working out in Chicago, and a past prime Ben Wallace. I mean, those are some of the probably biggest noteworthy signings from the Bulls over the past 20 years. And if we're just talking about the last 3 years, I genuinely can't think of any signings that were better than Garret Temple. I mean, we did sign Thaddeus Young last season, and that initially looked like an awful signing, but this year under a new coach, he's actually made a huge impact. His salary is a bit high though, which is why I would put the Temple signing above that one, because Garret Temple is only a 1-year, $5 million deal. Keep in mind, these are free agent signings that we're referring to, so this doesn't factor in trades or draft picks. Otherwise, I would not agree if you say Garret Temple was the best overall move the Bulls have made in the past 3 seasons. Yeah, I'm trying to think of free agent signings off the top of my head in the past 3 years, and I can't think of one that tops Garret Temple. I mean, I could be missing someone, but Jabari Parker, no. Felicio, definitely not. Yeah, I agree with you, Robin. Anyway, guys, I'm going to leave it at that for now. I'll try to come out with a part 2 video of other hot takes you guys left me later today. Thanks again for sending me your takes as always, and I will catch you guys in the next one.